Believing in something doesn't make it true. People believe in a wide variety of things, but not all of those things are real. In the distant past, people believed the world was flat, but that belief didn't make it true. People can have faith in something, and that faith itself is very real. There's no denying it. But faith, like belief, doesn't make that something true. However, those who profess belief, who profess faith, often do so because they feel they have good reason for doing so. They aren't just arbitrarily throwing their belief behind something because it's fashionable this year. At least most of them are not. Theists who have a belief in God offer a great variety of reasons for their faith, from what they feel is good scientific evidence for their beliefs to sound logical deductions. Non-theists, however, are familiar with these reasons and simply have not found any of them convincing. Some theists will state that their belief in God is founded upon scientific proof of His existence. When pressed to present that scientific proof, it may entail something like life requiring extraordinary circumstances to exist, and those circumstances had to have been arranged by a supernatural being, and that supernatural being is God. Skeptics are not convinced by that line of argumentation and have a ready answer for it. Other theists may point to the incredible accuracy of the Bible as proof for God's existence. They may point out the historical accuracy found in certain books of the Bible and use this as proof that God exists. Again, skeptics are largely unpersuaded by this line of reasoning, as there is quite a lot in the Bible that is not historically or scientifically accurate. Other theists may claim that without God there is no morality, and since we all have an innate sense of right and wrong, this intuitive morality is proof that God exists. And yet again, skeptics have different reasons for human ethics and morality that do not require a deity. More cautious theists may point out that everything in the universe has a cause, and that would include the universe itself. The theist may go on to state that since nothing in the universe could have caused the universe, whatever originated the universe must exist outside of it and be greater than it. The only thing that fits the bill would be God. And again, such an argument is unpersuasive for the skeptic, because even if they accept that something caused the universe, it's a huge step to equate that something with a personal God. And what if there are multiple causes, each building on the next, while the one preceding it vanishes from existence? Why does the cause of the universe have to be a monotheistic God? In the end, almost all theists, however, will fall back on one final proof for God's existence that no skeptic can assail. The theist feels God, and it's not that the skeptic is left in stunned silence at such a proof. It's only that how is it possible to convince someone that what they feel isn't real? A theist may state, I believe in God not because I bought a bill of goods, but I know God is real because I feel Him. And by feel Him, the theist isn't always referring to some sort of nebulous, undifferentiated sense of oneness with the universe, a feeling of calmness or serenity. A theist making such a claim can actually be stating that they have physical feelings which they attribute to the presence of God. It's a feeling of electricity or energy or another person. They may feel a conviction of absolute assurance that they are right in their belief. Feeling God, then, is a means of believing in God, even when everything else fails to provide sufficient evidence that such a creature exists. It is what Christian apologist William Lane Craig means when he's talking about the witness of the Holy Spirit. Contradictions, errors, and falsehoods of the Bible can be laid out for the Christian theist, for example, showing the error of relying on the Scriptures as proof that God exists. But such evidence does nothing to persuade the theist they haven't been witnessed to by the Holy Spirit, that they don't really feel God. Feeling God is something intensely personal, and it's a wall of faith no skeptic can hope to penetrate.
The way in which I know Christianity is true is first and foremost on the basis of the witness of the Holy Spirit in my heart, and that this gives me a self-authenticating means of knowing that Christianity is true wholly apart from the evidence. And therefore, if in some historically contingent circumstances the evidence that I have available to me should turn against Christianity, I don't think that that controverts the witness of the Holy Spirit.
But it's not that skeptics cannot explain why some people have these feelings of God. Indeed, research has been done about the brain and the neurophysiology of belief. A feeling some people have of another being quite separate from themselves is sometimes referred to as a sensed presence. Feeling someone else with you in times of great stress, for example, seems to be a product of the human brain and not of something actually supernatural. These feelings may be brought about by prolonged isolation, extreme hunger or thirst, injury, extreme temperatures, sleep deprivation, intense fear, drug overdoses, or by other chemicals. But they can sometimes happen with no discernible external stimulant. Skeptics can point to studies on the topic that explain how the brain works and how this may explain these feelings of God's presence, the so-called witness of the Holy Spirit, of a supernatural energy.
At Laurentian University in Canada, Professor Michael Persinger has been running experiments which seem to show that you can induce mystical experiences by entirely mechanical means.
Effectively, as behavioral neuroscientists, we're interested in the sense of self, that is, the human sense of self, and we know it's coupled in large part to linguistic or language processes. Now, that primarily involves the left hemisphere in most individuals, or at least left hemispheric processes. So we asked the question, what would happen if you stimulated the right hemisphere? And we developed a technology which allowed us to do that by imitating what the brain does normally, applying very weak, complex, physiologically patterned magnetic fields over the right hemisphere, and found that under appropriate conditions, people had a sensed presence. The characteristics of the right hemisphere, which involve space and emotion and intense meaning and vigilance and a sense of infinite time, this kind of characteristic imbues the experience of the sense presence with these qualities. And that often is what defines God and other kinds of deity concepts in most cultures. We also know that children go through changes. About 9 to 10 years of age is when the corpus callosum, which is the primary structure connecting the two hemispheres, not the only structure, but the primary one, matures. And it's about this age where children in all cultures suddenly have these feelings of a sense presence. They can be terrified by it. And it's this particular age that many of the religious initiation rites begin. What we find in our experiments is that the experiences that all people have are remarkably similar. The feeling of a presence, the feeling of an entity, and all of these are remarkably similar. But the label they place on it is given to them by their culture or their belief systems, and that's how they remember it 20 minutes later when it's now consolidated into personal experience, which is primarily linguistic labeling. The atheist, and we've had a lot of atheists go through our chamber, will say, well, I experienced a presence, I was out of my body or whatever, but I know it's my brain. Individuals who are more religious, it will be a function of the religion. Christ was there or whatever. If they're more transcendental, they say that was obviously my spirit guide or my dead grandmother or my dead mother. Aboriginals tend to attribute the experience to an ancestor. So the label that you place on those experiences then influences how you reconstruct it.
And what's going on in the brain when they hear a voice?
When you think in words, what happens is there's a signal, in effect, which comes back from the frontal cortex to the auditory cortex, which kind of turns down the gain. It kind of shuts down the auditory cortex. So it's almost like your brain is saying, don't listen to this, because it's only you talking. And that signal is absent or less strong in people who hear voices. But that's the scientific explanation. Of course, it's very important to bear in mind that people who have these experiences themselves will try and explain them, and for them the purpose of the explanation is slightly different. Usually the explanation is one which helps them live more happily, and a comfortable and probably well-adaptive explanation of those experiences might well be that, you know, I'm having communication from a benevolent God or something like that. Of course, if you're having communication from a malevolent God, that's not so great.
Now, if I was to hear a voice in my head, having no religious belief, having nothing to attach that to, my tendency might be to try to ignore it, to suppress it, to be maybe worried about it.
Sure.
Now, if I had religious belief and I was to hear a voice in my head, it's quite possible that I'd think, well, this may be my God speaking to me.
No,
I have an interest in the supernatural.
Does
that hold water, do you think?
Yeah, no, that definitely holds water. But equally so, it could be the process might work the other way around. It may be that if you're somebody who has religious beliefs, then your threshold for deciding that you are actually experiencing something rather than just imagining it may be affected. So, you know, we all have sensations, a voice in our head. it's part of human life that we have to discriminate between the voice in our head, which we generate ourselves, our inner speech, and speech in the external world. Now, a threshold for deciding whether something is in our head or in the external world will probably be affected by our belief systems.
So the kind of habits we associate with religious practice, being in groups and chanting together, or being solitary and meditating, these are precisely the right kinds of circumstances to generate a sense of a vision or a voice or a sense of being connected to something outside ourselves.
Yes.
Hearing voices that aren't there, seeing things that don't exist, flying without wings, walking through walls, conversing with dead people or with animals. It's easy to forget that most of us do such things and we don't think it's remarkable at all. It's just that we call it dreaming. And we wake up, well, usually, and forget all about it.
But again, these explanations rarely work to persuade those who have committed themselves to belief based upon these intensely personal feelings. Perhaps these factors just mentioned apply to other people's experiences of God, the theist will claim, but not their own. Such theists simply claim to know their experience was real.
The fact that what we experience is shaped by our physicality does not mean that it is determined by our physicality, or that it is only to be explained in physiological terms.
So just as I might be able to touch a bit of the brain and which creates the smell of almonds, it doesn't mean that almonds don't exist. That's
the kind of argument I would use, yes. Yes.
However, we can objectively point to almonds in the real world. No one can deny that almonds are real when they are placed on the table and held in the hand. It's quite a different thing when it comes to God. God is nothing like an almond. Children often have similar reactions regarding their own personal experiences. Many children are afraid of the dark, and there certainly exists more than one explanation as to why. Fear of the dark may be rooted deep in our evolutionary past, when very real dangers lurked in the shadows when the sun went down. A child who cannot distinguish between fantasy and reality, as most cannot at a young age, will often mistake a shadow or a creak of wood in the wall for something sinister. When such fears protected our species from being gobbled up by making us afraid to venture beyond the safety of our group and the campfire, they were certainly useful indeed. However, in the modern world, such fears do little more than keep everyone awake at night. But the underlying cause is still the same: fear, driving one into a safer environment. We do to children in the modern world something we would never have done in the ancient. We isolate them in dark rooms, away from light and the safety of the rest of the family. It's little wonder children develop a fear of nighttime and the dark. However, understanding the root of the fear and having it explained to them usually doesn't make the fear go away for some children. For them, the monster in the closet exists no matter what the adult says. Even if the adult opens the closet and shows that nothing exists within, the child will simply invent a reason for why the creature disappears when the adult opens the door, but reappears as soon as the adult leaves the room. Children need to mature both intellectually and emotionally before they realize that their feelings about there being something lurking in their dark closet isn't sufficient evidence or proof that something really is in their closet. But for many theists, feeling God will always be the ultimate, unassailable proof of God's existence, no matter how such feelings can be explained scientifically. Feeling God is a fact of religious faith. It is something many theists cannot be reasoned out of, regardless of how irrational it is. And this is something skeptics must learn to accept.